Let's take a look. A world without crime, with liberty and justice for all. That's within our reach, thanks to the 200-plus superheroes in the Vought family. We see a bright future ahead, where there is a Vought hero in every town.
A few weeks back, Amazon released their latest and greatest show to Prime TV, The Boys. It instantly made a buzz on social media, receiving plenty of praise from general audiences and critics alike. So I figured I'd give it a shot, and I have to say, it's pretty damn good. A story originally told in comic book form by creators Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson, The Boys forms its narrative around the idea of superheroes existing in a real 21st century world. Other comics, TV shows and movies have toyed with this concept before, but I don't think any of them pulled it off nearly as well as The Boys does. The show holds nothing back when discussing the downside of celebrity culture, the greed of corporate America, and the relative nature of morality that most media tends to neglect. Whilst those talking points don't exactly make for a light-hearted show, it's definitely a fun watch that I'd recommend if you haven't seen it. If you are caught up on The Boys, however, stay with me through this spoiler-filled breakdown of how this show manages to be so captivating.
Wow. Fuck. You are dark. And I kind of like it.
Right out the gate, The Boys lets you know it's not your standard comic book TV adaptation by having the 1-2 punch of our protagonist's love interest being straight up exploded, shortly followed by the deep Louis C.K.ing Starlight, a naive recruit to the superhero big leagues. Whilst these moments very effectively set up the show's cynical tone, it was here that I realised The Boys would be real, that it would be challenging. It's rare enough to find a big budget TV show willing to acknowledge some of the horrific shit that goes down in Hollywood, but The Boys takes it further, having Starlight be unable to do anything about it, and making her struggle to come to terms with what happened to be a defining aspect of her character. This isn't the only time The Boys comments on celebrity culture, either. In fact, huge portions of the show's narrative are dedicated to tackling the idea of having people as brands, something prevalent in modern society. All of Vaught's heroes have extensive teams behind them, managing their public relations and image. It's revealed that Starlight is only recruited for the Seven as her story and motive align with the image Vought wants to manufacture their next hero into. Hell, the presentation of Vaught's heroes is so artificial that Homelander was literally raised in a lab, which contributes greatly to why he's the most evil of them all. I mean, the show isn't remotely ambiguous when depicting the corrupting effect of being a brand. Starlight's naivety doesn't last long at all once immersed in Vought. When the corporation's marketing team are pitching her a new outfit, you can see her begin to buy into the story they're telling, only for her to realise it's an attempt to boost her sex appeal.
I can't wear that.
However, the best representation of the corrupting effect of being a brand comes not from Starlight, but Queen Maeve. As the audience, we experience Maeve's character growth in reverse, seeing first what she's like in the present day, and gradually learning of her past. Maeve is first introduced in the aforementioned bathroom scene with Starlight, where she's blunt and dismissive towards her, despite her trauma being entirely justified. Queen Maeve then coasts along as the disconnected alcoholic of the group for some time, until an event too horrific for her to be apathetic toward, the plane incident.
Just these two!
No, what? So they can tell the world that we left the rest of them to fucking die?
Come on!
No, Maeve. No, you stay back! All of you, stay back! You stay the fuck back or I'll laser you, goddammit! I'll laser every fucking one of you!
When she and Homelander are unable to save the many innocents on board that flight, including Homelander refusing to take any at all since it would hurt Vaught's PR, she can't help but become self-aware of the nature of being a member of the Seven. Subsequently, she visits an ex-girlfriend from a relationship that seems to have fallen apart due to Maeve's celebrity status, which further reinforces for her that being a public figure led to her corruption. Having come to terms with all of this, she's able to connect with Starlight in this scene, where she finally shows vulnerability and a glimpse of the virtue she once had.
I really did want to make a difference. I really did care. I was just like you. And then I started giving pieces of myself away, and I guess I gave away everything.
Furthermore, the show demonstrates— No, I'm not dealing with this right now. The show demonstrates the dangers of idolizing fame through Starlight's mother, who's so desperate for the glamour of celebrity that she willingly let Vought drug her baby child. Although the origin of most of the soups is still unclear, It seems likely many others also had parents willing to give their child to Vought for fame. Annie also remarked that her mum took her to hero pageants when she was a child, which indicates the issue of parents drugging children in pursuit of fame is widespread to the extent that an entire ecosystem has developed to support just that. Already, we've discussed the moral shortcomings of the Deep, Queen Maeve, Starlight's mother, and practically the entirety of the Vought Corporation. However, questionable morality in the boys goes much further than just them. In fact, nearly every named character in the show has exhibited both moral and immoral behaviour, with perhaps the only exceptions being Homelander and Starlight, who are consistently evil and indisputably good respectively. Huey is initially presented as a mild-mannered, geeky retail worker whose biggest drawback is that he's a bit of a pushover. Aside from this trait putting a little strain on his relationship with Robin, his general behaviour is mostly neutral in terms of morality. It doesn't take long for this to change though, as once he meets Butcher, well, I think it's fair to say he picks up some dubious moral principles pretty quickly.
I'm not a murderer.
A few moments later.
Still, whilst I'd call him exploding an invisible man questionable at best, I don't think it warrants the label of immoral considering the context, but he gets there eventually. After Huey begins to manipulate Starlight to infiltrate Vought, all viewers should be on the same page when it comes to Huey's ability to act unethically. Still, the show is eager to remind us that it's all relative, and Huey is the lesser of two evils, so he remains one of our good guys, even if he doesn't quite fit the definition. The same holds for all of the boys, and each has to make steps to redeem themselves. Whilst Frenchie never fails to be an absolute sweetheart, he's someone who's very comfortable with killing, even before we're introduced to him. Frenchie is able to find absolution through his relationship with Kimiko, as her treatment at the hands of Vought sets her on a path towards evil that only he could divert her from. Mother's Milk's immoral action is breaking his promise to his girlfriend of not associating with Butcher again, subsequently putting her and their daughter in danger. To redeem such action, he convinces Butcher to make a deal with the CIA to put his family under their protection. Huey's step towards forgiveness from Starlight for his betrayal begins with him risking his safety to be with her for the confrontation with A-Train, and later him attempting to save A-Train after he suffers a heart attack. In fact, by the end, the only member of the boys who hasn't at least partially redeemed themselves is Butcher, who cannot put aside his outright hatred for Soups and desire for vengeance on Homelander to help save the rest of the group. Somehow, the boys manages to get even more— oh, for fuck's sake, no, I'm not dealing with this right now. The boys manage to get even more challenging when considering the morality of a couple of characters, namely A-Train and the Deep. I find these two cases particularly interesting because their situations occur quite frequently in real life, and even after watching the show twice, I'm still pretty undecided on them. Firstly, A-Train is nothing but a string of horrible actions. He kills Robin to kickstart the whole plot, he kills his girlfriend after she was extorted by the boys, and he probably would have killed Huey and Starlight if his heart didn't give in. However, I find it hard to dismiss him as evil in the way I can Homelander for a few reasons. He had a rough upbringing, as shown by his close relationship with his brother and a brief clip of him explaining his childhood to the Vought marketing team. On top of that, he's constantly under strain from Vought, and they were the ones who put pressure on him to murder Popclaw. But the big issue I have, which is entirely unique to him in this show, is his substance abuse. Much like in real life, addiction shouldn't be a justification for consistently evil actions, but it certainly complicates things when trying to judge a person's morality, especially if they lack support systems to cope with the issue to the extent that A-Train presumably does. Perhaps most uncomfortable of them all, the ambiguity towards my feelings on the Deep by the end of the show is harder to find the source of. I mean, it shouldn't be hard to just categorise him as a bad person. What he did to Starlight in the pilot is near unforgivable, and it's not like he's doing anything to achieve forgiveness either. Still, by the end of the show he's nothing more than pathetic comic relief, and the only thing close to good actions that he's done is, saving his aquatic friends. But for some reason, I feel just a little sympathetic towards him. My guess is it's something about seeing him keep getting kicked when he's already down, but I'm not too sure. Anyway, I think those two cases are likely to be the most divisive to come from the show, so please let me know how you feel about them in the comments below. Outside of what we've considered already, The Boys also has a really interesting premise. It conducts the thought experiment of what if superheroes were real, in a cynical yet entertaining way. And it's not like the show's being cynical for the sake of it. I'd imagine most people who entertain this premise would arrive at similar conclusions.
They're bad role models for children. Just look at them. Look at Wonder Woman. Look at how she dresses.
Other shows and movies that play this game rarely find the level of success The Boys does though. One of the biggest grievances I've heard regarding Batman vs Superman was that applying this cynical filter to characters already established as heroes felt uncomfortable for audiences. Brightburn also confronts this idea, but the movie fails to confront just how dark the issue could be, something that The Boys definitely does not struggle with. It is really interesting to think, okay, yep, we'll do this, you win. To be honest, as hard to watch as those scenes between Stillwell and Homelander were, they are pretty valuable to both the characters and the plot of the show. Imagine you're Madeline Stillwell for a second. You have the most powerful man in the world in your employ, and he's making your company a ludicrous amount of money, but he also has no real reason to be subordinate. You'd probably feel as we find out she does. Absolutely fucking terrified. Now, there's no real way to separate herself from the laser-eyed psychopath, so she does the next best thing. She tries to placate him in any way possible. From Homelander's perspective, it's not too hard to see how being raised in a lab without parents can lead to a pretty killer Oedipal complex. For those unfamiliar, an Oedipus complex is an idea originally thought of by Dr. Sigmund Freud, who applied the name of the tragic hero from Greek mythology to his theory. Freud believed that male children who fail to reach sexual maturity desire to sleep with their mothers and feel resentment towards their fathers, with whom they are competing for their mother's attention. In the case of Homelander, he feels Stillwell's baby is challenging for her attention, so Stillwell ends up sleeping with him as a means to pacify him. This idea is reinforced until the very end. Whilst being held hostage, Madeline Stillwell expressing concern for her child visibly irritated Homelander to the extent that it contributed to him killing her. By murdering Stillwell, his surrogate parent figure, he completed both actions originally executed by Oedipus himself, as Stillwell was to Homelander both the parent to sleep with and the parent to kill. Stillwell's attempts to keep Homelander under control were probably the most extreme, but there are more examples of how having a hypothetical Superman clone will go down in a real world, and how much fear one would command. When Butcher goes to the CIA with a long list of demands to support the boys' operation, they're willing to oblige every request save the prosecution of Homelander. The fact an organisation with as much power as the CIA is too afraid to go after him speaks volume to his strength. But they have a point, he could kill thousands before anyone is able to stop him. Homelander's ability to inspire fear goes past just regular humans and government organisations though. His fellow supes were also terrified of him. He commands such fear that A-Train was willing to kill Popclaw at his word, and look how the Deep cowers when being interrogated by him here.
And I trust we never have to have this conversation again.
Of course not. Just this once.
The final commentary on social issues The Boys provides is a criticism of corporate greed and the hyper-capitalist nature of modern America. Considering the behemoth of a company bankrolling this show, a call out on the avarice of monopolies was the last thing I expected to see in The Boys, but it's definitely there. I mean, the show really doesn't want you to like anything Vought is doing. Every time someone working there drops a financial statistic, I feel part of my soul die. But it doesn't stop at just a mild obsession either. Vought full on gives terrorists superpowers just so they can increase the value of their superhero assets, who, just to reiterate, were drugged as infants so they could make Vought money down the line. Vaught's branding is everywhere, to the extent that Huey can't even run to the local convenience store without seeing the face of the guy who killed his girlfriend half a dozen times. Vought have, to the general public, ingrained complete faith in their heroes through their extensive branding, to the extent that even after his first encounter with A-Train, Huey struggles to grasp that supes might be bad people.
They're all like that? All of them? Even Homelander?
On top of the many cases of isolated harm we see Vought inflict, they're also shown to be completely willing to interfere with government if it's expected to boost their share prices. In the very first episode, Homelander kills a government official and his son because they have information that could expose Vought. Similar involvement is seen when Stillwell blackmails another government employee to help Vaught's build to allow their supes into the military pass. All this corporate interference has likely already had a negative effect on American civilians, and the show makes it clear the situation will only worsen as Vaught's power increases. Despite this show's scenario revolving around a company of superheroes, Vaught's meddling still doesn't feel too separated from our reality. The same month the show came out, Facebook was fined $5 billion for interfering in many recent political votes. That about wraps up all I have to say for now, but I could definitely see myself talking about this show again sometime. The Boys had one of the strongest first seasons I've ever seen, and I'm interested to see where it might go in the future. The cliffhanger ending definitely sets up a very pivotal moment in Butcher's character arc, and I could see it leading to his redemption or damnation. In fact, most of the supes finished in a similar state too, considering Stillwell is no longer in charge. It doesn't sound that impossible for the show to build towards an all versus Homelander kind of scenario. Anyway, that's enough of the hot take predictions, since they'll probably only bite me in the ass in the future. A huge thank you to everyone who's stuck with me this long, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe to help this channel out.
You're not the hero of this story. And I'm not the one who's trapped.